Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Inept General, bringing you a breakdown of everything we know about the upcoming Tomb Kings DLC. We're taking the information we saw from the trailer, from the Steam breakdown, and from the interview on Twitch yesterday. So let's just go through everything we know so far, shall we? Now, I'm going to try and do this in some kind of ordered manner. So we're going to kick things off with sort of the funnest aspect of perhaps the Warhammer games, and that is the Legendary Lords. So we had 4 Legendary Lord confirmed. The first one is Settra, and Settra, the Imperishable, the High King of the Tomb Kings, is going to be in the game. We've seen him on his chariot in the trailer. He looks very imposing, very cool, much like one would imagine him. Can't wait to get hands on him. He's probably the true and righteous ruler of all of the Tomb Kings. So maybe a sort of hot favorite for many people to start off their first Tomb King campaigns. And we've got an idea of his starting position as well. It looks like he'll be starting where he really should be, in Khemri. And so we see him here. That looks like it's going to be his faction icon, the kind of winged statue. So that looks like what he's going to be doing there. So Khemri, his starting point, and looking forward to seeing the reworked cities in that part of the world. So, not that much more to say about Settra. In terms of his faction bonuses, he is going to get a bonus to growth, a bonus to public order. He will reduce construction time on all buildings as well, and all his Tomb Guard and chariots get bonuses to their armor. So that's kind of how Settra is going to be played and where his advantages lie. So the next Legendary Lord we have coming up is Queen Khalida. Now, she very much has a very big hatred against the vampires, and I actually really like her faction bonuses. She, of course, is the cousin to Neferata, the mother of all vampires, in fact, the first vampire, and she went on to start the whole Vampire Count faction, effectively. But Neferata fought her in a duel, lost, and was bitten by her cousin to try and change her into a vampire, and she prayed to the tomb god Asaph, who's the kind of goddess of like snakes and purity or whatever, and she purged the vampiric corruption from her, allowing her to die normally. But like many of the Tomb Kings, she ended up not staying dead, and so still rampages around with her ongoing hatred towards her cousin primarily, but that's kind of spilled over to all of her cousin's kind of vampire children as well. So a huge distaste of all vampires. And they talked about her campaign a little bit, and it looks like it will be played really fun. Like, she's seemingly going to focus on vampires. So her starting position is out in Lustria, and we can actually see that here on one of the Steam pictures. So she's out in Lustria. They've given her a mount, which she didn't have on the tabletop, but it kind of fits with the goddess of snakes. That they gave her one of the sort of necropolis night mounts, the big snake statues. That fits kind of thematically quite well, so I don't actually have any objection against that. And so this is her starting position. As you can see on the map in the top right corner, it's kind of in the southwest off the coast of Lustria near the Copper Desert. Which kind of actually fits. It's another desert in the world. I'm not sure what she'd be doing there. Maybe the idea is that she was sent there to hunt the vampires on the Vampire Coast, but they're a whole continent away from her, and Khemri is much closer to the Vampire Coast than this location is. So, who knows? Maybe she got lost, her ship crashed, whatever the reason, she's over there. So that's the idea with Khalida. Now, she gets a number of bonuses that fit in very nicely with her character. In fact, probably thematically one of the better put together characters for Total War Warhammer. So her bonuses are, she gives a bonus to all missiles with ammunition. She takes less attrition from anything, which is a very good one to have. She gives poison to all the units in her army, and that kind of fits with everything. The idea is that she's kind of immune to poison actually on the tabletop. So they've taken that poison thing, and the blessing, if you guys have seen my Tomb King army video, which I do recommend you check out, which will go through units in a lot more detail than I'm going to go through in this video. I'm actually just kind of going through them, just saying what they are, rather than going into big descriptions about where they come from. So do check that video out. Again, top right corner, or you'll find a link in the description below. And the Asaph blessings, which is the goddess that she's kind of committed to, is what gives all the archers and missiles in the Tomb King army their little bonus. So it's good that she gives a bonus to missile fire as well. So that's her with her starting position on the Forgotten Isles. Yeah, kind of a fun way to play. The only bummer is she'll take her a while to get to any vampires. That's the only kind of downside of this. She'll have to fight through the Lizardmen, the Skaven. It'll be a bit of a slog. Even the High Elves, to a certain extent, further over to the east there. So, yeah, a bit of a slog to get to the vampires, but she'll get her vampire killing on eventually, I'm sure. Although that's where she's starting in the Vortex campaign, in the Mortal Empires campaign, she'll be starting in her home city, which is here in Libaras. And that's where she was the queen of originally, and is very close to Lamia, so she'll be fighting the Silver Host. And in the Mortal Empire campaigns, it looks like she'll get her hands on some vampires much quicker. And it does actually make a very interesting thing, because you have Krokgar, based out of the Temple of Skulls, and you have Queek, based out of the Charnel Valley there. So, yeah, very fun little group that they'll be fighting amongst each other. And so, yeah, good starting position that I'm quite happy with in the... and it also will give Krokgar something to do apart from killing Queek. So, yeah, fun little combination there, and I think a good starting position for her. So, moving on from Khalida, we have Grand Hierophant Katep. Now, he is being sent off. Now, I don't know if there was ever an official model made of Katep. I think this is a custom job, but he has been sort of exiled from the Tomb King lands to try and sort out the problems that the mortuary cult caused with Nagash. So, he has a weird starting position. He is actually sent out miles away over here to Scarpel's lair on the western side of Dark Elf territory. Now, I'm not exactly sure where he's going to be in the Mortal campaign, in the Immortal Empires campaign. They haven't mentioned that as of yet. But yeah, it'll be interesting for him to be up here. Not a lot relevant to Tomb King lore over here near the Dark Elves and stuff, but... you know, they've also said this is going to be the most challenging campaign. So if you're up for a challenge, take this one, because he is just surrounded by enemies who will not like him. There's no chance of allegiance or anything like that, really. So he's going to have a bit of a tough time isolated by himself in the Dark Elf continent. So, yeah, unlucky for him, but that's his starting position. In terms of his bonuses, he gives a bonus to casualty replenishment, he gives a bonus to army movement, and he gives a bonus to the ranks and the number of Lich Priests he can have, who are the magic casters for the Tomb Kings. So he's the head of the mortuary cult, and just isolated, having been exiled. Now, I think he will probably start somewhere on the... if I'm going to guess for Mortal Empires, trying to put myself in the minds of the CA guys, I'm going to guess, like Teclis, who started on the far side, he might end up on one of those little breakaways on the eastern side of the continent, rather than going back to Khemri. Because if they're already moving Queen Khalida over there, then I think that might be a bit too crammed to get everyone over in Nehekara. So I think they'll maybe keep him on the eastern side of this continent here. So let's move on from him, and we have the last legendary lord, who is, of course, Arkhan the Black. Now, we haven't seen an image of him in-game yet, but Arkhan the Black, Nagash's the first necromancer Nagash, his right-hand man, helped him usurp the throne of his brother. Arkhan the Black's really been his best buddy, chief lieutenant, for millennia now, and yeah, we'll probably continue to do so. Now, Arkhan the Black has a lot of sort of interesting aspects to his gameplay. He has a diplomatic bonus with vampire count factions, rightfully so. He takes no penalties against vampiric corruption as his faction. His heroes get a melee and defense buff, melee attack and melee defense buff. He has a higher Winds of Magic reserve bonus, and apparently, now I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, but it sounds great. With certain buildings or with certain abilities, he is able to summon, as it was said, vampire count units. Now, whether he can only summon them on the battlefield or whether he can recruit them into his army, we're yet to identify. But I think that's very fitting that he should have access to some vampire count units, and it would make his faction very interesting if you can use sort of the best of both worlds there. Sort of a very interesting guy, fantastic unit, and it hints really heavily that we might see Nagash at some point in the game. But Nagash is like a chaos level threat. He's a very scary dude to pitch up, and if he's not the end of the Tomb King campaign, I'd be pretty surprised. But we might see him hopefully at some point in Game 3, because Nagash should appear at some point in this Total War Warhammer game. But that is Arkhan the Black. His starting position will probably be the tower, his tower, the Tower of Arkhan, which you can see here, the Black Tower of Arkhan. Now, that is pretty close to Khemri, but, you know, we'll have to see how that goes. I think it'll end up being a situation like Musion, where both factions have such a high sort of state build-up in their garrison that neither side will be able to easily take over the other in the early game, so they'll have to grow up next to each other and kind of evolve that way. Now, we haven't had this confirmed. I'm just assuming it is called the Black Tower of Arkan, so it'd be weird if he didn't start there. So there we go. That is the legendary lords for us in the upcoming DLC. Good collection of them. I'm really happy to see them there. It's great to have 4 legendary lords in the pack. But let's move on to the confirmed units. Now, I'm not going to lie to you here, guys. We have essentially had all of the roster confirmed. There's only a couple of things missing, but we'll go over that as well. So let's see what we do have confirmed so far. Starting with the lords, we have the only lord listed in Steam is the Tomb King. Now, there is another type of general, the High Lich Priest, who's a magic user general, who they don't seem to have given you the option for. But one thing they have highlighted is that there will be like specialized generals. So we'll have to wait and see whether there's variety in the type of general you get. But the only one listed on Steam officially as a generic general was the Tomb King. Now in campaign, we're going to get into the campaign mechanics a little bit later, but it might explain why they've only given one generic variety of general in the Steam page. But we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about campaign mechanics. So the Tomb King's the only one listed. So we've seen him that he will probably have a War Sphinx mount. Here in the trailer was a shot of the War Sphinx breathing fire, and as you can see, there's only one guy on the back of it. Now, War Sphinxes can have a crew, or they can be a mount for a hero or general. So this could either be a Tomb King or a Tomb Prince, one or the other, but it looks like it's confirmed that War Sphinxes will be a mount for them. So moving on to the heroes, nicely, we have the Tomb Prince, which we mentioned earlier, kind of a scaled-down version of the Tomb King. He'll probably give a bonus to fighting troops. I imagine he'd be the guy for training and stuff like that. That's what I kind of imagine his upgrade tree will look like. And we've also seen that we'll have the Lich Priest, and they'll have the laws of Nehekara. If you guys don't know what that is and are interested, do check out my Tomb King magic video, where we go into that lore and some of the spells we're likely to see in Total War Warhammer, turning up in the top right-hand corner now, or you'll find the link in the description below. But they also have access to the laws of death, and the Law of Light, I believe, was the third one. That may be wrong. I'm just going off the top of my head here, but I think it's Light. We see here that we have the Law of Death. So that's been confirmed that they have the Law of Death. Law of Light, yet to be officially confirmed, but I can't imagine why they wouldn't have it. So there we go, Law of Death for the Lich Priest, and we see the little unit card there as well. The other hero we confirmed is the Necrotech. Now these guys are the architect stroke slave drivers of the Tomb King world. They build the building, so I imagine they'll give huge bonuses to construction and a lot of bonuses to the construct units within the Tomb King army. So those are the living statues. Things like the War Sphinx, the Ashapti, which are the big sort of animal-faced guys that we saw in the trailer. These guys will probably give a bonus to all of them when they're in an army, whether it be a replenishment bonus or a fighting bonus, we'll have to wait and see. But it's good to see the Necrotechs there. They bring something a little bit different to the hero world. So let's go on to the confirmed sort of generic units. And we have the skeletons confirmed, skeleton warriors. Now they have a spear and sword variant. Now, I thought there might be a shielded and unshielded variant. We'll have to wait and see, but it looks like only thing we've seen so far are the shielded variant. So we've seen them in the background there. There are other shots where we're a bit closer on them, but that's the one we kind of picked out. They're in the trailer. We have the skeleton warriors. You can tell them apart from the Tomb Guard, because the Tomb Guard have this sort of ornate headdress, whereas the skeleton warriors do not. So those are the skeleton warriors. We have skeleton archers. There's a lovely shot of them that we've seen just here marching towards battle. So skeleton archers confirmed. As to why these skeletons can shoot and the vampire counts don't, again, refer to my army video, guys, in the description below. And we also have the card here for the skeleton archers, and sort of double confirmation there for you guys. Tomb Guard, we've seen them. As you can see, there's the ornate headdress that they have there. We see them in the background here. These guys don't have a shield. So there might be a shielded and unshielded variant for them. You see Skeleton Warriors also in the background to the left there. But we will have Tomb Guard. So there we go. And again, Tomb Guard shown here with both a halberd and shield and a sword and shield. So we have those two variants of the Tomb Guard confirmed as well. We have the Skeleton Horsemen. Now, all we've really seen for Skeleton Horsemen is a unit card. So we know they're there, sort of a light cavalry. We have the Skeleton Chariots, again, featured heavily in the trailer as they charge towards the enemy, crushing them. So we have the chariots confirmed. We also have the Ushapti. Now, we have seen all 3 variants of Ushapti. So you get Ushapti with great weapons, which you can see on the right here. And you have Ushapti with 2-handed weapons. Now, somewhere in this material, I could swear to God I saw Ushapti with bows. But I can't remember what image I saw it in, so I apologize. I couldn't fish that one out for you guys. And actually, we see, I think, yeah, here we go. In the bottom right here, you see their unit card. So there might not be an image of them, but we definitely have their unit card. So we have the 2-handed variant on the left there. We have a unit of Stalker in the middle. And then we have on the right-hand side, the 2 units of Ushapti with bows. So those will be pretty long range, I have to imagine, archery unit. So there we go, Ushapti of bows, Ushapti, one of the units I'm looking most favored to play around with. Should be a fun unit, and it looked like from the trailer they might come in a unit of 5. Oh no, 15 there, you can see, oh actually maybe not. I'm not sure what the size of the unit will be. That might be a 20-man unit when it's fully done up, and then the bowmen look like they're 12 fully done up. So that's interesting to know, the unit size. Okay. Tomb Scorpions, we definitely saw, guys. Popped out of the sand, chasing the guy, killed him, trailer, we've seen it. Tomb Scorpions, where the bodies of the Lich Priests are entombed and they give life to these massive scorpion statues. Necropolis Knights, we've seen multiple images of these guys, and it looks like there'll be 2 variants of them. We have the Necropolis Knights with shields, and as you can see down here, it looks like there's a non-shielded variant as well. So you'll get shields and non-shields as the 2 variants of Necropolis Knights. I assume, yeah, that's the only 2 variants I can really think of them doing for them. So there we go, that's Necropolis Knights. The Stalkers here, terrifying looking creatures, ambush killers. We've seen a lot of images of them. You can see them there in the unit, 16-man full unit it looks like. And we can see them here to the feet of the warriors, the Necropolis Knights, to the right and to the left. So those are the Stalkers. They look great. I have to say, one of the models in all of this stuff look fantastic. So they look fantastic, the Stalkers. The War Sphinx we've seen in action, just stomping down, charging things out. And so the Khemerian War Sphinx we've seen confirmed. And I think we've had it confirmed that it's both a mount and we have the little, I think it's the Howdah. That's how they say it. The Howdah with the little crew on top. I think we've seen both variants in the materials. And this one is the one we've seen, the image of the one we've seen earlier. The Necrosphinx we've seen. Now, someone in the comments somewhere mentioned that we've seen them in flight, but we haven't really seen them in flight. In the trailer, it looks like he's just making a charge. So, yet to see these guys flying about, so that'll be an interesting thing to see. Yeah, we've seen them in the trailer smashing down on their enemies, just doing a bang-up job. These guys are really monster killers, so I hope to see them with an anti-large bonus as well. And we've also seen the unit card there, but this is for a Regiment of Renown one. This one's white, and that kind of fits with the lore as well, because they're made of all kinds of stone and metal. So just because most of them are this kind of blackish green, doesn't mean there can't be one made of marble. And looks like this Regiment of Renown one is made of marble. But we're going to get into the Regiment of Renown stuff a little bit later when we talk campaign mechanics as well. Now we have the Hero Titan. The Guardian, the guide to the underworld for the Tomb Kings, a unit that really had only been created by fans. Games Workshop never made one. These guys brought it to life. It looks remarkably just like this custom-made model by fans as well. So pretty on it there with laser eye beams, which is a very nice touch. I do like that. So we have the Hero Titan. And yeah, we've seen a lot of them. Their abilities will be, as we can see here in the bottom left, that's the Hero Titan selected. It does have its spells as on the tabletop bound to its item, but limited uses it looks like, which is a bit disappointing, but rather than a cooldown. But you have Leech and you have Shem's Burning Gaze. So that's good fun to have. They are tied to the Scepter is Shem's Burning Gaze, and the Scales is tied to Spirit Leech. Those are the ideas. It's 2 weapons have the magic in them, as well as apparently laser eyes and a big stamping foot. So a very scary guy to have in your army, it looks like. And yeah, and then we have the Carrion. We've seen these guys early in the trailer fly around, big vultures. It looks like they come in units of 1, but I'm not 100% sure of that. That might have just been for cinematic effect, rather than groups of 4 or 5 like the Vargulf. Or Vargai, Stephen. I always get those mixed up. But here we go, flying Carrion overhead in the battle. We've seen them going for it. Tomb Swarm, we know will be an ability that you can get by doing one of the rites that the Tomb Kings have. Now, what this looks like is unclear. It sounded in the Twitch interviews like he was describing a summon, and then it's like a unit of these guys scurry out of the sand and you can control them. Whereas in the Steam work page, they're more like it's a vortex spell. It sounded much more like a vortex spell. So I'm not 100% sure how it works. It might be a bit of both, like a unit that you just can't control that moves around by itself. But it's good that they made an effort with the Tomb Swarm and they are included. I have to applaud that. So they just had to think of a different way of putting them in rather than having them take up an army slot or anything like that. So hopefully this maybe paves the way for other Swarm units to make it in the game later on. And finally, we have actually, I have two more. We have the Screaming Skull Catapult, the artillery. Now, I will just say one thing about the Screaming Skull Catapult. The implementation looks amazing in the game here with the bodies on it still, resurrected, moving around. The only maybe problem I have is the look of the artillery. It's a single, like, spirit skull. But my interpretation in my mind, and maybe it was only me, was that they'd fire sort of multiple skulls. And I thought they'd always have like they'd always come in together, but have more of a scatter shot effect when they hit, as opposed to a single like magic skull. But I guess that maybe would take, I don't know why they didn't do it that way, but it's maybe simpler just to have one big spirit skull going through the sky than actual skulls flying through the air. But there we go. I thought they'd stay together. I didn't think they'd spread out too much, but that was my interpretation. But I think this is okay, I guess, but just not what I thought it would be in my head. That's fine. The Screaming Skull does magic and fire damage, potentially, so truly a terrifying piece of artillery, and would probably do discourage in the game as well. But we'll have to wait and see for the stats. But we've definitely seen the Screaming Skull. And last but by no means least, we have the Casket of Souls. Now this looks like a unit like the Slan Mage Priest and the Black Arcs that you can only get by performing a rite every so often. So it looks like this will be, I have no idea we just know that we have it. We've seen it as a unit card here. How it plays yet, we don't know. There are a lot of questions. In the tabletop, it didn't move. It did damage all over the map, forcing opponents to take leadership tests for each of their unit. But I just don't know what it's going to look like in Total War Warhammer. I'm curious to how they implement it. One of the bits of information we don't really have, but it is in the game, so that's great to see. And that's about it for the confirmed units, guys. From this point on, we're really looking at the missing units. And there's not a lot of them, which leads me to believe that we effectively have the full roster revealed already. So the only missing units that we haven't seen are the High Lich Priest as a general. Now, technically, the legendary Lord Katep, the Grand Hierophant, is the highest of Lich Priests. So we kind of have that template already, so it's a bit weird that we don't have the lesser generic Lich Priest General. But it might just be a typo in the Steam thing. The other thing we're missing is the Tomb Herald, but I didn't think these guys were going to make it in. They're more battle standard bearers, which played into a mechanic that hasn't really been translated over to Total War Warhammer. So understandable that these guys were left out. And we haven't seen these skeleton horse archers yet. But there's no reason I can see for these guys not being in the game. These guys might be the only thing that was left out of the promotional materials, because they have the horsemen already, so they have the models for the horses, they have the animations for horse archers, so I can't see why they wouldn't have skeleton horse archers in the game. I'm not sure why they wouldn't have them, but we haven't seen them yet, so still missing units. And the big one, the one that probably maybe isn't going to make it in, the one that people are going to be a bit miffed about, is the Necrolith Colossus. Now, I was surprised because I just thought they'd use giant animations and change the skin to look like a skeleton, and that would be them done. It would be the least amount of work. But we haven't seen the Necrolith Colossus. Now, I'm not so much bummed at missing out on the Necrolith Colossus. He had a few varieties of weapons that giants didn't have, such as he could have two-hand weapons, he could have a great weapon. But what I'm more bummed about is that they could also have a bow, which acted like a ballista. So it just took essentially an artillery option away from the Tomb Kings, which might actually be missing a little bit. A sort of highly mobile artillery piece that fires ballistas is actually something that they could probably do within their army. So it's a bit of a bummer, only for that reason, to not see them. Like, I think, for as far as I like to see giant units bashing each other about, the Hierophant, the Hierotitan ticks all those boxes for me, even better. But we haven't seen the Necrolith Colossus, which is a bit of a bummer. Probably the unit I'm most upset about not having in the roster so far. So let's talk about the new battle mechanics a little bit. And there have been a couple of new battle mechanics introduced. The first one being the idea of the Realm of Souls. Now, we see this happening in the top here on the battle screen. Now, as you've seen with Murderous Prowess for the Dark Elves, they kind of get themselves worked up, they launch into battle, and as soon as they hit a amount of dead, they get their Murderous Prowess trait. This looks like it will be the same, and it's kind of taking the lore attribute of Nekakaran magic and applying it to all Tomb King armies, which is right. They don't have typical undead healing like the vampire counts. It doesn't work in that same way. Instead, what they usually have is, with an augment spell of the lore of Nekakara, whenever they cast that on a unit, that unit would heal as well as get all the benefits from the augment. But unlike that, it looks like just the amount you kill on the battlefield will heal all your units at several different junctions, possibly to a maximum in the battle. So that's a cool interpretation of the rules for the Tomb Kings. And I kind of like the way they've done it. The fact that you'll hit 2 massive points of healing throughout the game and throughout the battle. So that's kind of fun. I like the way they've done that. It'll be interesting to see how much healing you get out of it, and that will dictate whether this is an OP or maybe an under sort of nerfed ability. Or it can't be nerfed because it's not out yet, but you guys get what I'm going for. So that will dictate that, and it's up there. And the next thing we should probably talk about while we're on this screen are the Regiments of Renown. Now, here at the bottom, we can see that there are Regiments of Renown in purple, and it looks like we are getting Regiments of Renown straight out of the gate. With the Tomb Kings. No waiting for an end of sort of game package. We're just getting the Regiments of Renown now, which is kind of cool. But there's also a level above the Regiments of Renown in the Tomb King army, and that is the Legions of Legend. Now, these are guys you can recruit through a specialized system, I think, known as the Mortuary Cult, and they're even better than Regiments of Renown. But much like the hunting targets that you'd get in the Norscan campaign, they won't be playable in multiplayer. They're that OP. They're just a little bit over the top, but a lot of fun for a single player to have. So really looking forward to seeing how those are implemented, and it's great to get Regiments of Renown off the bat. So those are the Regiments of Renown. And we're also getting a new lore of magic known as the lore of Nekakara. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the video. I've done a separate video on it. Again, check out my Tomb King magic video. You'll find a link in the description below. But the only reason I picked this image is because you see one of the spells going off in the bottom left-hand corner. And that is, I think, Storm of Skulls. The only sort of direct damage dealing magic spell in that lore. The rest are kind of augments and hexes, but this is a vortex spell going off over there. So there we go. That is the new battle mechanics for this DLC. And let's move on a little bit to the campaign mechanics. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention about the Regiments of Renown was that they're actually all, for every faction with this update, getting pushed back. So you'll have to wait till you reach a higher level before you can start recruiting Regiments of Renown, which I think is actually fair. For the campaign, getting some Regiments of Renown when you're level 4 or 5 isn't great. So I'm happy with them moving that sort of watermark up a little bit in the campaign to make you wait till later on in the game before you start getting some of these Regiments of Renown. So yeah, as I said, let's move on to the campaign mechanics. Now, the first thing is that the Tomb Kings in the Vortex campaign are not after the Vortex. In fact, they're after Books of Nagash. Now, there are 9 books, so I'm not sure why this counter says 5. Maybe something happens after 5, and then you have to get the last ones. I'm not entirely sure, but in the Twitch interviews, they always mention 9 Books of Nagash that you're going to get, so I'm not sure whether there are 5 here. But that's the idea. And each book, like the Vortex, each time you hit a mark in the Vortex, you will get a bit of a cinematic. And they have said that these cinematics are going to be telling you the backstory of Nagash and what happened to the kingdom of the Tomb Kings. Now, this is fun, but it also, the thing I'm most excited about this bit of news was, it points towards building up Nagash as the big bad at the end of this campaign, which would be amazing. I can't even tell you how great that would be if you get to fight Nagash at the end of this campaign. That would be absolutely fantastic. But that's what these are all building up to. You're getting the Books of Nagash. That's how you move the campaign forward in the Vortex campaign. Now, outside of the Vortex campaign, in the Mortal Empires campaign, you can also collect the Books of Nagash, but they won't have the same like story effect. In fact, rather what they will do is have you get bonuses. Now, in the Vortex campaign, they'll also give you bonuses. Now, these bonuses are randomized, so it's not always the same for each Book of Nagash, which is a fun little thing. It brings a bit of variety to every campaign you do. I like the idea. I think it plays out really nicely. So that's how the Books of Nagash will work in the Vortex and outside of the Vortex campaign. Really looking forward to that. And the other thing we're seeing is this jar mechanic. Now, as many of the other factions have like secondary resources or secondary currency, shall we say, the Tomb Kings don't need any currency. They don't pay for units, and they don't pay for any upkeep on units. So that's just not happening. I think they call that effect the Day of Awakening, but it just means you don't pay for anything. So there's no need for money in the Tomb Kings. Instead, what you have is this resource of these jars. Now, you get these jars through doing missions, through actions your heroes carry out, a number of different ways, and they're used for several different things. They're used in a new mechanic known as the Mortuary Cult, which allows you to craft legendary items as well as recruit the units we mentioned earlier, the Legions of Legend. So you'll recruit specialized regiments of renown, and you'll build weapons with this currency. And I imagine you'll also maybe have to give it for some researches and some buildings and stuff like that. But that's the way that will work. Now, as far as control of units without you having to pay for anything, units are controlled by the amount of buildings you have. Buildings will give you slots in your army for a certain number of each kind of unit, and buildings in multiple cities add up so you can have that amount of units in your armies. Now, armies are also limited by the research system, which is called the dynasty system. So when you research, you go through a particular dynasty's research tree. Now, with each dynasty research tree, you can unlock another army slot. So you can have another army, but you're limited to one army until you unlock these slots. And these slots will also give you other things, other bonuses as well as just research. They'll give you heroes, they'll give you, I think it was maybe units, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but they'll definitely give you heroes and specialized generals as well. Like with the High Elves, we saw them do a specialized general called Alistair. Now that was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. They built that for Make-A-Wish. He's not a character in Warhammer lore. They just made it look like one of the sick kids, who I'm told through the chat is fine. He's recovered actually. But that was through the Make-A-Wish thing. They kind of took that idea and went, okay, we can make non-legendary lords just specialized legendary lords that look distinctive. And so it looks like they've made 6 of them, which you unlock through this research tree as well. So all your units are controlled by 2 means of control: the buildings for your unit slots, and for the amount of units you can recruit of each type, and your research for the amount of armies you can have at any one time. That's how you're controlled. No money, nothing like that. Those are the only things that cost you. So that's interesting. It also means you can replenish really quickly with no additional cost. If you lose units, you just get another unit because you have that slot available. So it makes it interesting. It keeps that kind of undead idea, keeps the reanimation, easy to get troops idea going. It's just a matter of keeping up your buildings and what you want in your armies. And it will make your armies a little bit less to your choosing and just kind of like what you've built. So that makes it very interesting as well. Now, apart from that, there's only a couple of other things. There's a new stance called Entombed in the Sand. We haven't seen exactly what that does. I think they said it would be better ambush chance and stuff like that. We've also seen all of the rights. The rights do different things. There's one where you can summon down a sandstorm, foreign armies take attrition, you get better ambushes. There's a variety of other rights that are sort of laid out in the Steam, but the rights aren't that interesting. They just, I use them sometimes in the campaign. They're not great, but they're a nice little bonus to have. And the Tomb Kings, like all of the other Warhammer 2 races, have rights. And that's about it, really, guys. As far as, there's a new crafting thing with that mortuary cult. As I mentioned, you can build those weapons using trade resources, stuff like that. Really, on the whole, just looking forward to the whole thing. Think it'll be great. And that's about it, really, guys. So, as always, hope that was helpful. Hope you guys are excited about this as I am. And thank you for watching, and I will catch you all on the next one.